Hey guys, in this video we'll talk about the brand new Shadowmark Talon Detachment that was just released today and how to play Raven Guard or any custom chapter for that matter using it. It's a really interesting one and I think it's going to be quite strong. So without further ado, let's dive right in. First, as we always do, we'll discuss the strength of the detachment and the army that would be playing it. So all of the new chapter related detachments, this one is a remake of some other Space Marine Codex detachment, in this case Vanguard Spearhead. And it's a pretty good remake, I must admit. It seems that they really wanted to keep the Raven Guard flavor in it and what Vanguard had of it, and also make it more user-friendly, and I think they succeeded. Detachment rules stayed largely the same, but now if your army includes Aithan Shan, the new chapter master, you get to use the Uppy Downy stratagem for free once per battle round, which is really good, considering that the character himself is also great, so you would want to have him in your roster, and having the ability to send guys up into orbit every battle round for free is essentially making your army a little version of Grey Knights, but with all the Space Marines raw power. Basic detachment rules stay the same. If your opponent is shooting at you from outside of 12 inches from your units, your units get -1 to hit and also have cover. Both are really useful. Obviously cover really exists everywhere now in 10th edition, however the -1 to hit doesn't, and any kind of pretty reasonably durable vehicle, when it has an always active -1 to hit, gets much harder to get rid of. And same goes for your guys that are on one side of the board and your opponent's units, shooting units that are trying to pick them off. If you have charged something like a scoring unit of your opponent, killed that unit, and now your squad is out in the open, it is going to be significantly more difficult for the opponent to kill them. So it's a really nice passive buff. Most enhancements are still the same, but now we have a count round as one higher enhancement, which is essentially identical to the one that we have in the Stormlights detachment, and it's probably the most powerful, maybe like top 2 most powerful enhancement in this detachment as well. So really happy that we have it here. Obviously, Stormlands has a big advantage in that you can use it for any chapter. This particular one, this detachment, we can only use for Raven Guard or custom chapters, so you cannot run that with something like Thunder of Cavalry, unfortunately. And we still retain the Infiltrators one, so an infantry squad led by a leader can get Infiltrators and set up right up close to your opponent's deployment zone. The strats, we lost the Booby Trap strat, which, I mean, that was a pretty good one. I would not say that it was a mandatory one to have, but it's a nice sticky strat and also mortal wounds potential. But we did gain the fallback and charge and shoot stratagem, which is amazing, and I would trade that for the booby traps one any day of the week. And that stratagem also has a second part where if you have a scout or phobos keyword, you get to advance, charge and shoot as well. It's an amazing stratagem essentially. And reactive move is now the classic type of d6 inches reactive move when something moves within, ends a move or advance or fall back within 9 inches of your guys. And if you have a keyword of Phobos or Scout, you also get to move 6 instead of D6. Also works only for infantry and mounted, so essentially just like the Gladius stratagem, only the 6-inch version is locked behind a keyword instead of a doctrine. Overall, the detachment is now a very cool mix between Gladius and Vanguard, and I love that breed. A very strong mobility theme, obviously, and it's going to be even more obvious once we go into army composition and the synergies. And we can have a really nice mix of shooting and some melee with protection from long-range firepower. And I think it's very clear how they want us to build this detachment, but I think it's a very cool way to run a Space Marines army, specifically Raven Guard. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40K coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. Before we go into how to run this army, let's discuss the weaknesses because every detachment has them. So you're locked to Raven Guards. You cannot use any cool stuff from Ultramarines, Dark Angels, etc. You can run their characters, and that sucks because some of them are really good and they worked really well with the Vanguard Evolved. So because you are locked to Raven Guard, it means that something like a 5 Deathwing Knights combo that go and stay up close to your opponent's deployment zone is not going to work anymore. Same for Marnius plus Biologist plus 6 Aggressors. That was also an amazing combination, and again, not possible now. Obviously, you can still run it in the Vanguard, just you cannot run it in this new Vanguard Plus. The detachment definitely lacks the melee buff stratagem, so you do have it, but it's the old get precision on your melee, which, I mean, sometimes in rare occasions is going to be useful, but I'm pretty sure they purposefully left it there so that we retain the flavor of the more surgical, precise anti-character, anti-lower toughness kind of nature of the melee that they want the Raven Guard to have, instead of them being just able to go up against anything like the Gladius should be able to. And I think that's very thematic, so I have actually no complaints. There needs to be some balance, and they don't want to just build another Gladius with a small twist. They want to have a detachment that has some significant differences compared to the Gladius. But it will mean that your melee units, which are ones you choose, are going to be limited to essentially what they bring to the table. So that means buffing characters are very important, or just picking the squads that do damage naturally. Centurions still can get deep strike, though this did not solve their problem. Unfortunately, I was really hopeful when I was reading that one. I was hopeful that they're going to be like give deep strike to a squad of infantry, but no, unfortunately, that still is locked, and Uriel Ventress is A, unable to give them deep strike, B, unable to use this detachment. So yeah, those guys are still gonna be waiting for their moment to shine again. But we do still have a lot of other cool stuff to use the uppy downy stratagem on. And I mean, you still can run Centurions, you just probably are gonna find it very difficult to position them, because they will have to use the reserves, strategic reserves instead, and when you're going to be repositioning them, it's going to be really, really tough. I would not recommend that. This will be a pretty high skill cap detachment as well, so you will need to coordinate multi-vector attacks and think about stuff a few turns in advance. So if you are into this kind of gameplay, this is a great detachment for you, because it will reward you a lot if you are able to play that kind of game. But it doesn't have the raw power, or the raw staying power, I guess, of some other detachments. So you need to be smart about how you play it. And if you are going to be smart, I think you're really going to enjoy it. And if I was a Raven Guard main player, I would be really happy about this one. Now, finally, about how to build the actual dem list. So army composition. I think Raven Guard roster should include about 3 main elements. The first one is a long-range shooting that gets to benefit from the -1 to hit and cover, melee units that dart around the board causing problems, and killing enemy scoring. And finally, the Phobos scout units that jump up and down and just do basic scoring for you, perhaps some movement blocking and zoning, but they don't really engage the opponent that much. Let's talk about each one separately. So the first, we're going to start with the long-range shooting. This is what is going to be doing the killing of your enemy heavy hitters, the enemy tanks, elite units. So essentially everything that number 2 category, so your melee stuff, cannot really deal with. Only the tanks will really always use the -1 to hit, because they're going to be far away from your opponent. Any kind of melee unit still goes closer to the opponent, meaning that sometimes you're not going to be able to utilize the -1 to hit. But something like a Lancer, for example, will definitely be further than 12 inches away. And I mean, cover is almost always going to be a thing anyways, but for that rare occasion when it's not, you still have it. So Gladiators, Ballistas Dreadnought, Redemptor Dreadnought actually are all very good. You still get the +1 to wound from Oath, remember that. So killing one nasty thing is more than possible, and that's why something like Redemptor I think is an interesting choice, and that's personally what I want to include in a roster like that, because I feel like Redemptors are already very tough to kill. Redemptors with cover even tougher still. -1 to hit and -1 damage just make them an absolute nightmare to remove from the board, and with +1 to wound, their plasmas can do a pretty good job against essentially anything in the game, no matter the toughness. If you know me and you know this channel, I'm a Redemptor fanboy, so you don't have to listen to me. You can run any of these other cool shooting units, just make sure that you have enough of it so that you can reliably kill tanks. About killing tanks, Inceptors are also really, really good, and they are thematic to Raven Guard, I think. So yeah, they make sense to me. They don't really synergize that well with stratagems because they don't really have the scout or phobos keywords. So they are essentially just like any other unit. But they are very good and I would run them too. For your melee units, well, unfortunately, don't have a big selection here because we cannot use any of the special cool stuff like Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Space Souls, etc. anymore for the detachment, so we have to stick with the Codex Space Marine stuff, and that is essentially JPI, so Jump Pack Intercessors, Vanguard Vets, Blade Guard Veterans, and a few others, like Terminators and Aggressors, for a more punchy but slower version. The faster of these units will generally have better synergy with our enhancements, and we're going to talk about that in the synergy section, but even the Terminators and Aggressors are still pretty good, and it's just a shame that we have to only use this. I wish there was some special Raven Guard jump pack option, or just let's make Vanguard Vets good again. Let's give them some actual weapons, because they used to be the elite jump pack stuff that was expensive but also deadly, and now they are Strength 5 AP1, which is just sad. On the other hand, I really do like the Jump Pack Intercessors for this detachment because they do the majority of their damage with mortal wounds, so they don't really care about the lack of +1 to wound or +1 AP stratagems or lethal hits, whatever. They will do less damage here than they would do with Honor the Chapter and Gladius, but the mortal wounds, they compensate most of what they need to do to the opponents anyways. Because the 10-man squad is still 16 points per model, because it was never made 18 points per model, like the 5-man squad. I think they're really, really price efficient now. And you can always run the JPI with chaplains, which I think are a good option. That would give them the necessary +1 to wound and also some extra mortal wounds and extra attacks. And the chaplains are a great vehicle for enhancements. Again, about that in a moment. We have a ton of great choices for scoring. Scouts and Phobos units have the best synergy with Into the Darkness, which is the uppy downy stratagem. They get to advance and charge with feint and thrust. That's our fallback and charge and shoot one. And they also get the full 6-inch reactive move with Raptoral Vigilance. By the way, all very cool names. Scouts already have the uppy downy capacity, so in that sense they would not really need that as much. But the 6-inch restriction will be lifted if they use the stratagem. So some niche applications that actually may be useful. However, for our Phobos stuff, so Reavers and Curses, this mobility is invaluable. Combi Lieutenant really also loves the ability to reposition when necessary, so I think you're going to run Aethan Shan in every list essentially as soon as he's out, in order for you to be able to actually do the jump up and down every turn. And just sending the combi weapon lieutenants all around the board is going to be useful, along with Incursus or Scouts. Talking about this guy, is a great lone up threat to run around the board killing infantry. He has a really good profile with his attacks. I think like 7 attacks, 5-2-2 with sustained hits 2 in Twin Links. So it's going to carve up pretty much any kind of low, mid toughness infantry. He can even do pretty well against Terminator stuff. He won't unfortunately be able to advance and charge because he doesn't have a Phobos keyword, which I think is a very, very big disadvantage. He otherwise would be just amazing, but he has a 14-inch move on his jump pack, so he doesn't really need to advance and charge anyways. The uppy downy stratagem is really sucks, the fact that he cannot use it. It would be amazing if he could, but again, I think he is still more than worth it, and his ability to give himself or his squad, which he cannot lead anyone, so it's going to be just him, the Rapid Ingress or the Heroic Intervention is also really good, and he also gives some free charge rerolls as well, so a whole bunch of stuff with this guy. Last but definitely not least, our retired former chapter master, Kaven Shrike, gives you another free uppy downy for his unit. He still can lead guys, and he also has the great lone up ability for his unit, meaning that his whole squad is lone up, so they can all be invisible to the enemy. As far as I understand, the Shrike is going to lose the Chapter Master keyword and his lone up, his personal lone up, but his rule should still apply to his unit. I mean, that will happen if you have the Shan in your army. Now let's quickly run through the synergies, and those revolve essentially around the enhancements. So first important one is the Hunter's Instincts that we mentioned before. A squad of 10 jump back intercessors, for example, with the chaplain would work really well with them. You can rapid ingress them turn 1 because it says that you can just treat the round as being one higher. So it doesn't say in your movement phase, it says treat round as one higher. So we can do rapid ingress with this, and you can just charge with impunity, because with 12-inch move, you should be able to hide them behind a ruin in your opponent's turn 1, and then in your turn 1, just march them out and charge whatever you want. And with 10 guys and chaplain, you should be able to do quite a considerable amount of damage to anything, essentially. A very annoying and pretty effective alpha strike threat. This also works pretty well with the Terminators, because rapid ingress in them turn 1 is going to make them an annoying thing for your opponent to deal with, and is going to throw a spanner in the works of your opponent. It's the only problem with them is that they only move 5, so unlike the jump back intercessors, if you rapid ingress in the Terminators, it may be that even after moving 5 inches, you're still going to have to roll a pretty long charge to get into combat. But I mean, you have to pay for throwing a bunch of Terminators in your opponent's face turn 1, let's be honest. Second one is similar to the first, but with the Blackwing Shroud enhancement. That's the old blade-driven deep one, so Infiltrator, keyword for a squad of infantry. Infiltrating 10 JPI with the Chaplain, you can stage them for a turn 1 charge very easily, and coordinate, or even coordinate 2 prawn attack with the Hunter's Instinct squad. So you can make it so that 2 units of yours charge your opponent at the same time. So have like 20 JPI in your opponent's deployment zone turn 1. That's pretty cool. And lastly, Caven Shrike, thanks to his Phobos keyword, can actually join a unit of jump back intercessors or Vanguard Vets and give them access to advance and charge through feint and thrust stratagem. So that's actually pretty convenient, and I'm glad I spotted that one, and I decided to check his keywords. I did really think that he's like Shan, the Tacticus armor, but surprisingly his Phobos. Now let's take a look at my roster example for the Shadowmark, and keep in mind the prices for Shan and the enhancements have, as far as I know, have not been released yet. So today is the day when the detachment was released, so it's very, very early. But I decided to estimate the price, and I've used the old prices for the the enhancement of the same caliber, the same role. And for Shan, I just guesstimated his cost, and I think it's going to be pretty accurate for that. So Chaplain with Jump Back with the Blackwing Shroud, I've estimated that at 100 points using the Blade-Driven Deep enhancement. He's going to lead a 10-man squad of JPI. Shan, obviously, he is at 130 points. In my estimate, he probably is going to be a bit cheaper than that, I hope. Even Shrike, he is 100 points, or you can have another Chaplain with Hunter's Instinct. So if you want to try the Shrike with Advance and Charge combo, you can go that direction, or if you want to, you can do the Chaplain with Hunter's Instincts and let them do the Rapid Ingress turn 1 thing. Next, we have a Lieutenant with Combi Weapon with the Coronal Sacernt. So that is the 12-inch aura of Lord of Deceit. This one is not really mandatory, I guess, because the Combi Weapon Lieutenant does not like to be within 12 inches of stuff, not always at least. You can use him offensively and just run him up to your enemy units when necessary, but this is something that you can cut and then potentially invest those points elsewhere. For example, upgrading the scouts to something like Incursors, which I think is not a bad idea, or Reavers. Both are great, and considering that you're going to be using the uppy downy stratagem all the time and scouts already have that inbuilt, it might be a good idea to do that. Honestly, I think the Reavers and the Incursors look better as Raven Guards than scouts. So from purely aesthetic standpoint. So the Shrike is going to lead a 10-man squad of JPI, and lastly, the last 10-man squad of JPI will be just a leaderless one. So if you wanted to, you can replace the Shrike with Combi Weapon with Shrike, and then you have leaders for each of the 10-man units. So then we have a 6-man Inceptor squad with Plasmas. We already discussed why they're good. We have a 5-man squad of Incursors. They're going to be great at supporting the Redemptors and giving them +1 to hit once they hit something with their Oculus Bolt Carbines. 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts. Well, you knew this was coming. I love Redemptors. They're just amazing. And 2 5-man Scout squads. So Redemptors are good for that bulwark, the anvil that your opponent will have to go through whilst being taken apart by your JPI Inceptors and your characters that lead them. Easily replace that with something like 3 Gladiator Lancers and save up 50 points per Redemptor. So this way you can actually get a lot of a lot more stuff into the list. This is just a quick example of how you can run this list, and obviously I want you to experiment with that and see what you can discover as the better option that fits your playstyle more. So overall, I really like this new detachment. I think it's a great spin that they've put on the old Vanguard. It's a shame that the Centurions did not find a place in this one this time around, but maybe for some other detachment they will be restored to their previous glory or something close to that. But yeah, if I was a Raven Guard player, I would definitely be happy. I like the new Raven Guard character, and I like this feeling that I have about this detachment. I think it's going to be fun to play. It's going to be cool. It still has the Raven Guard aesthetic, but it's a bit less weird than the Vanguard one was. So it has all the power of the Vanguard, I think, and even better user friendliness. So let me know what you think about this detachment in the comment section below. I genuinely want to hear that. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.